So security research is more than the technologies we use. It is understanding the context we use them in and the practices of use. Sitting in my Airbnb in Beirut, I waited for Hassan to respond to me on WhatsApp, the local cash exchange guy, providing access to cash in times of economic destruction when ATMs were inaccessible. The currency had lost 80% of its value, and with the black market rate being necessary to afford daily life in Lebanon. This contact was shared with me as a trusted person who provided a fair rate and would deliver the necessary cash to my apartment. As he arrived on his moped and opened the back seat to reveal hundreds of bills of Lebanese lira, I recognized how much technology is intertwined in our ontological and everyday security practices. And once that relationship was established, Hassan was also able to get me a SIM card and deliver that to me 30 minutes later at a pre-arranged spot, a local coffee shop, as now that I had cash I could eat. So my name is Jessica. I'm a PhD student at Royal Holloway, University of London, and today I'm presenting to you the paper, Othered, Silenced and Scapegoated, Understanding the Situated Security of Marginalised Populations in Lebanon, on behalf of my two wonderful co-authors, Rikke and Reem. Coming from Northern Ireland, I'm particularly passionate about working in post-conflict communities, and today I hope to convey to you why we need to do more situated security research to better design and situated technologies which support people to live free from harm. So why Lebanon? There's been many religious and political tensions in Lebanon for the last many centuries, and the Lebanese civil war from 1975 to 90 has left legacies of sectarianism, intrinsically linking identity and security to and through these divides, creating a foundational narrative of us and them. The sectarian governance and corruption has flung Lebanon into an economic crisis, with the World Bank referring to Lebanon's financial sector as a Ponzi scheme. Electricity is only available for 2 hours per day, which has created a space for generator cartels to exploit the situation for a high cost. Infrastructure access is also a partisan issue, with those having greater political control having greater access to electricity also. Wi-Fi access is also unstable due to the limitations on electricity, and this, coupled with the reduction in 2 and 3G technology coverage and the hike in price of data packages, has pushed approximately 300,000 people offline in 2022 alone. So just to draw your attention very briefly to the conceptual grounding of our work, we draw from security, human-computer interaction, and wider sociological literature. And I'll draw your attention very briefly to the post-conflict transition continuum, as we recognize Lebanon to have many of the characteristics identified by Brownlanger and Stewart, which highlights the state of flux between times of stability and instability during the move towards peace. And this informs the security context that we're working within. Briefly then about our methods that we used. I did 2 weeks of ethnographic fieldwork in Beirut, including interviews in July 2022. However, we use the term ethnographically informed research because this acknowledges that the observations heavily influenced our findings. However, we recognize that this was a short period of time to do ethnographic fieldwork. I did hold 13 interviews while in Beirut, only 3 of which were arranged prior to travel, as the trust relationships really increase significantly whenever you are there in situ. We did receive full ethics approval from the Research Ethics Committee also, and all participants provided full informed consent. And we practiced data minimization practices. We therefore collected as few data points as we required, and I transcribed all interview recordings before leaving the country so as not to cross borders with sensitive data. And these images, I hope, can depict a bit about how I met people, whether it be in their offices, in a coffee shop, or even at a protest site, to somewhere they were most comfortable to be. So moving on towards our findings. So first of all, we'd look at the technological state control. The relationship between the technological landscape and governance is complex in Lebanon, and I'll give you a brief moment just to read the short quote on the screen. The amount of paperwork can allow corruption to continue, yet some participants doubted if digitalization would actually result in greater transparency. Digital systems have been employed, for example, for online registration of biometric passports. However, this system is often overbooked due to the nepotism and clientelism of those in control. And there's also a waiting time of nearly 2 years because the government and the ministry cannot afford to pay for the paper of which the passport needs to be printed upon. Digitally enabled practices of surveillance are another form of technological state control, which extended beyond the traditional geographic sectarian boundaries of control. And there was a feeling of uncertainty amongst participants. For example, there was concern that the state had access to WhatsApp messages, either through direct or indirect infiltration of groups. And this was of particular concern to people during the 2019 protests and also during election periods. with one participant stating, "Everyone is watching everyone, and it's not a safe environment." So I'll move on to practices of othering, resulting in scapegoating and silencing of marginalised communities, and this was evidenced when talking with participants. For this presentation, I will highlight our findings in relation to the LGBTQI+ community, but our paper goes into further details of how women and refugees were also othered. And again, I'd like to give you a moment to read the quote on the screen. Participants cited how security and identity are influenced by the patriarchal, sectarian, and class-based structure that permeated Lebanese society, while articulating how this resulted in heightened security risks for gender-diverse groups. Diversionary theory has long been used in international relations theory and statecraft literature, yet it also has an importance to the security community. And there is evidence that significant political players used blame to gender-diverse groups, and participants expressed concern about the potential danger of algorithms in promoting inflammatory content during the time of socioeconomic decline. And these polarizations became evident online, with one participant sharing how LGBTQI+ groups have become silent in response to the violent comments online. And this silencing ultimately forces people to repress their identity, reducing their sense of ontological security and security of the self due to this societal positioning. And the final section of our findings discusses why it's important to situate accountability in the post-conflict Lebanese context. And at this point, you probably get the idea. I'll give you one last moment to read the quote on the screen. So designing security is more than just simply adopting standard Western-based digitalization processes. For example, digital systems developed to cater to Western norms are explained to be incompatible with the multiple paper-based identity systems in Lebanon, and I think this quote references this tension. And situating accountability also encapsulates the current content moderation systems. Content moderation is often tokenistic, with one participant sharing, and I quote, "They'll hire someone who looks like you, a brown woman with curly hair, and she'll be Palestinian and she'll reply with a Palestinian accent and say we're looking into it. However, she goes back inside the company and she isn't able to do anything." So there is a need for greater resources within the content moderation, and this is evidenced in the Lebanese case. There's also a need for greater diversity because there are different dialects in the region than the standard Arabic dialect. And this is compounded by the ongoing sectarian divisions. So therefore, distinguishing between what is inflammatory or harmful content without local cultural knowledge was explained to be close to impossible. So I think our findings evidence how elements of political, economic, social, and digital security all interact, and I would now like to mention how positive security can be used to understand these findings. So there's an opportunity for security researchers to work within post-conflict communities to co-create hopeful security technology. Drawing on an understanding of positive security as the freedom to live free from harm, we call for digital security that goes beyond that, and thus not only starts from a goal of countering existing threats, but which focuses on enhancing dialogue and supporting aspirations across fragmented societies. This post-conflict transition continuum highlights the state of security and insecurity that people in Lebanon experience on a daily basis. And through a positive security approach, we can work towards a reconciliation of society instead of a point from the harms and the legacies inherited from the conflict, thus helping to disrupt the us and them rhetoric that underlies the mechanisms of othering in Lebanon. And we detail positive and negative security in greater detail in the paper also. So one example of how positive security can be employed in the post-conflict context is through digital memorials. As digital memorials act as stewards of the stories of conflict, and they open up the spaces that remain closed in the offline world, therefore enabling people to share their stories and advocate for justice in support of reconciling historically rooted violence. Security researchers are therefore well positioned to help to safeguard data and accessibility and protect the new community-owned narratives of conflict. So looking towards the future, post-conflict context should be given greater attention by security researchers. Collaboration is key to inform security design through working towards with different groups, such as human rights defenders and social and political experts. Here, computer and social scientists need to work together to understand the security needs of the communities first. And future work should also be open to using different methods, for example, to consider using longer-term ethnographic work in post-conflict settings to deepen the digital security understandings and insights that we've begun to uncover here. I flew into this conference directly from Bogota in Colombia after 6 weeks of doing ethnographic fieldwork there, ahead of hopefully 3 to 6 months of fieldwork next year. So I'd be very interested in speaking to anyone who's interested in working in post-conflict contexts. It would be really great to connect. So thank you very much to all of you who listened today, and I do hope you have full time to read the paper. And I just want to leave you with this presentation with a photo to commemorate the many people who lost their lives in the Beirut blast just over 3 years ago on August 4th, 2020, an emblem of corruption and of accountability, and a reminder to why many more people should focus their research in the security community on strengthening the digital security of post-conflict contexts. Thank you.